always thought my father was the only man my mother ever loved. But 10 minutes ago, I found a secret buried under 20 years of dust. In this book, my mom is wearing white. She's smiling a smile I've never seen before. A look of pure raw joy. But the man holding her hand isn't my dad. He's the man who has watched our house from the shadows every night since I was 5 years old. The man we called the ghost. My mother didn't just know her stalker. She married him. But before we continue this story, I'd love to know, where are you from and how old are you? I'm really curious to see who is with me today. Happy listening. The air in the attic was thick. It wasn't just the dust. It was the weight of time. Every breath I took felt like I was swallowing a piece of the past. It was cold up there, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and stays there no matter how many sweaters you wear. My boots made a loud thud-thud-thud on the old wooden floorboards. Every step felt like a mistake. The wood groaned under my feet, a long slow creak that echoed in the tiny space. I was only up here because my mom's roof was leaking. Just find the old tarp, Leo, she had told me, her voice shaky. She's been shaky a lot lately. I pushed past a stack of cardboard boxes. They smelled like damp basement and old newspapers. My fingers were stained gray with soot. I moved a pile of moth-eaten blankets, and that's when I saw it. It was tucked away in the very corner, hidden behind a broken vanity mirror. It was a box made of dark wood with a heavy silver lock. The lock was broken, hanging off by a single rusted screw. My heart started to beat a little faster. Thump, thump, thump. It was a fast rhythm like a drum in my chest. Why was this hidden? Why was it so far back? I sat down on a milk crate. The plastic dug into my legs, but I didn't care. I pulled the wooden box toward me. It left a clean trail in the dust on the floor. I reached out, my skin prickling. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip my knees for a second to make them stop. It's just photos, Leo, I told myself. Just old memories. But my gut told me I was lying. As I stared at the box, my mind drifted to the window downstairs. For 20 years, that window had been the scariest place in the world. I remember being 6 years old. I was sitting on the living room rug playing with toy cars. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I looked up at the glass. There he was. He didn't move. He just stood by the big oak tree at the edge of our yard. He wore a long dark coat that looked too big for him. His face was always in the shadows, but I could feel his eyes. They were heavy. They felt like a weight on my skin. Mom! I had screamed. She had run into the room, her face pale. She didn't call the police. She didn't grab a baseball bat. She just walked to the window, closed the heavy velvet curtains, and held me. She was shivering. I could feel her heart racing against my ear. Don't look at him, Leo, she whispered. If you don't look, he isn't there. But he was always there. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every time I failed a test or fell off my bike, I would look out and see that dark shape. The police said they couldn't do anything because he stayed on public property. My dad used to yell at the man, screaming until his face was red, but the man never moved. He just watched. Eventually, we stopped talking about him. He became like the weather, just a dark part of our lives that we had to accept. Back in the attic, the silence felt heavy. I reached into the wooden box. My fingers touched something smooth and cold. It was a photo album covered in white silk. The silk was yellowed now, stained by years of neglect. I opened the first page. The sound of the page turning was like a physical blow. Crinkle. I stopped breathing. The photo was professional. High quality. It was a wedding. There was my mother. She looked beautiful. She looked younger, maybe 21. Her hair was up in soft curls and she was laughing, a real deep laugh that showed all her teeth. She looked so happy it hurt to see. But then I looked at the man standing next to her. He was wearing a tuxedo. He was tall. He had a sharp jawline and deep-set eyes. He was looking at my mother like she was the only thing in the universe. My blood turned to ice. It felt like someone had poured freezing water down my spine. I knew those eyes. I had seen them through a window pane for 2 decades. I had seen them in my nightmares. I flipped the page. Another photo. They were cutting a cake. He was leaning in, whispering something in her ear, and she was blushing. I flipped again. They were dancing. He was holding her waist so tightly, his knuckles white. My head started to spin. The attic felt like it was shrinking. The walls were closing in on me. I felt sick. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. Who is this? I thought. This isn't my dad. My parents got married in 1998. This photo. The date on the back says 1994. I turned the album over. My fingers fumbled with the pages. I was looking for a name. Anything. Then a small handwritten note fell out of the back cover. The paper was thin and felt like it would crumble if I breathed on it too hard. The handwriting was my mother's. Neat loopy letters. It said, "To my dearest Silas, our love is a secret the world isn't ready for. I will wait for you forever, even if we have to live in the dark." My heart was moving so fast now it felt like it was going to burst out of my ribs. Silas. That was the name. Suddenly I heard a sound. Creak. It came from the attic stairs. I froze. I didn't even blink. I sat there on that milk crate, clutching the album to my chest. Creak. Someone was coming up. But my mom was at the grocery store. She told me she'd be gone for an hour. My dad was at work. I looked toward the small, circular window at the end of the attic. Down below on the street, the spot under the oak tree was empty. For the first time in my life, the man wasn't there. Creak. The sound was closer now. Whoever it was, they were walking slowly. Purposefully. They knew exactly where they were going. I looked at the top of the stairs. A shadow began to grow against the wall. It was a long, thin shadow. A man's shadow. I wanted to move. I wanted to hide. But my legs felt like lead. I couldn't even scream. My throat was dry like I'd been swallowing sand. The shadow reached the top. A hand appeared on the wooden railing. It was a pale hand with long fingers. Then, a face stepped into the dim light of the attic. It was him. The man from the street. The man from the photos. Silas. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look angry. He looked at the album in my hands, then he looked me right in the eye. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "You have your mother's eyes, Leo," he whispered. His voice was low and scratchy like two stones rubbing together. "I've been waiting a long time for you to find that." He took a step toward me. "Now," he said, reaching into his long coat. "Give me back my book. It's time you learned who your real father is." My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Silas stood there at the top of the stairs, framed by the dark rectangle of the doorway. He looked taller than he did from the window downstairs. He looked more real, and that was the scariest part. Up close, his skin looked like old parchment, thin, yellowed, and covered in tiny lines. But his eyes, they weren't old. They were bright, sharp, and a piercing blue color that seemed to glow in the dim attic light. Those were the eyes from the wedding album. Those were the eyes that had been burning holes into the back of my head for 20 years. I said, "Give it back, Leo," he said again. His voice wasn't a shout. It was soft, almost like a lullaby, but it made the hair on my arms stand straight up. I looked down at the album. My fingers were clamped onto the white silk so hard my knuckles were white. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. My voice sounded small, like a child's. "What do you want with my mom?" Silas took another step forward. The old floorboard screamed under his weight. Creak. He didn't answer right away. He just looked around the attic, his eyes landing on the old boxes, the broken mirror, and the dust. He looked like he was visiting a grave. "I don't want anything with her," Silas said, his voice trembling just a little. "I want back what was taken from me. 20 years of watching. 20 years of waiting in the rain, in the snow, in the heat of July. Do you know how many nights I've spent under that tree, Leo? Counting the seconds until the lights in this house went out." He reached into his coat pocket. My heart did a somersault. I thought he was pulling out a knife or a gun. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, waiting for the end, but when I opened them, he was holding something else. It was a small silver locket. It was tarnished and dull. "Open the album to the middle," he commanded. I didn't want to. I wanted to run. I looked past him toward the stairs, but he was blocking the only way out. I was trapped in a cage of old memories and dust. Slowly, my shaking fingers turned the pages. Flip, flip, flip. I stopped at a photo of my mother sitting on a stone bench. She was wearing a simple summer dress. Around her neck was that exact same silver locket. She gave that to me the night you were born, Silas said. He stepped closer. I could smell him now. He smelled like dry leaves, peppermint, and something old, like a library book that hadn't been opened in a century. She told me she had to protect you. She told me your father, the man you call Dad, would hurt you if he ever found out about us. My brain was spinning. My dad. My dad was a quiet man. He liked to fix lawnmowers and watch the news. He was boring. He was safe. He was the man who taught me how to throw a baseball. The idea of him being someone dangerous felt like a lie. It felt like the world was turning upside down. You're lying, I spat out. I felt a surge of heat in my chest. My dad is a good man. You're a creep. You've been stalking us. You've been scaring me my whole life. Silas let out a dry, hacking laugh. It sounded like he hadn't laughed in years. Stalking? Is that what she told you? Is that what the good man told you? He shook his head. I wasn't stalking you, Leo. I was guarding you. I was making sure he didn't do to you what he did to me. He reached up and pulled back the collar of his long, dark coat. On the side of his neck there was a thick, jagged scar. It looked like a bolt of lightning carved into his skin. Your father did this, Silas whispered. In 1995. The night he took your mother away. He told me if I ever stepped foot on this property, he'd finish the job. So I stayed at the edge. I stayed where I could see. I stayed where I could watch over my son. The word son hit me like a physical punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs. I'm not your son, I said, but my voice was weak. I looked back at the wedding album. I looked at the man in the tuxedo. I looked at his ears. They had a weird little fold at the top. I reached up and touched my own ear. It had the same fold. I looked at his chin. He had a tiny dimple right in the center. I had that same dimple. I used to think I got it from my grandpa on my dad's side. Suddenly, the attic door downstairs slammed shut. Bang! The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Silas jumped, his eyes darting toward the floor. Leo? Are you up there? It was my mother. She was home early. Her voice sounded different. It wasn't the sweet, shaky voice she used when she talked to me. It was sharp. It was terrified. Leo, answer me. I heard her footsteps running through the hallway. They were fast. Pitter-patter-patter. Silas looked at me. For a second, the scary ghost look disappeared. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who was about to lose everything all over again. Don't tell her I'm here, he hissed. He scrambled backward, hiding behind a large stack of old trunks. If she knows I broke the promise, he'll kill us both. You don't know what he's capable of, Leo. You don't know the man who raised you. I stood up, the milk crate scraping against the floor. My head was pounding. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my throat. Leo. My mother was at the bottom of the attic stairs now. I could hear her heavy breathing. I looked at the trunks where Silas was hiding. I could see the tip of his dark coat sticking out. Then I looked at the wedding album on the floor. I quickly kicked some old blankets over it, hiding the white silk. My mother's head appeared at the top of the stairs. Her hair was messy from the wind outside. She was clutching a grocery bag so hard the plastic was stretching. Her eyes were wide, scanning the room. When she saw me, she let out a long, shaky breath. Oh, thank God. You're okay. She walked over to me and grabbed my arms. Her hands were ice cold. Why didn't you answer me? I saw the front door was unlocked. I thought someone was in the house. She looked around the attic. Her eyes passed right over the spot where Silas was hiding. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did and she was just really good at pretending. I just got distracted, Mom, I said. My tongue felt heavy in my mouth. I found some old stuff. Just junk. She looked down at the pile of blankets I had used to hide the album. Her eyes lingered there for a second too long. A flicker of something, fear? Guilt? Crossed her face. It's too cold up here, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Let's go downstairs. I'll make some tea. Your father will be home soon. The way she said your father made me shiver. It didn't sound like a happy thing. It sounded like a warning. I started to follow her toward the stairs, but I stopped. I couldn't help it. I looked back at the trunks. Silas was peering out from the shadows. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my mother's back. There was so much pain in his eyes it made my own chest ache. He put a finger to his lips, telling me to stay silent. As I stepped onto the first stair, my foot brushed against something. I looked down. It was the silver locket. Silas must have dropped it when he ran to hide. I reached down, snatched it up and shoved it into my pocket. We walked down to the kitchen in silence. The house felt different now. The walls felt thinner. The shadows felt longer. Every photo of my dad on the wall seemed to be watching me, his eyes judging me. My mom put the kettle on. The whistle of the water starting to boil was a low, rising moan. She stood at the counter, her back to me. "Mom?" I asked. My voice was steadier now. "Yes, honey. Who is Silas?" The sound of the kettle began to grow louder, a high-pitched scream. My mother didn't move. She didn't turn around. But I saw her shoulders hitch up toward her ears. She stood perfectly still for a long time. The steam from the kettle was clouding the windows. Outside, the sun was starting to set, turning the sky a bruised purple color. Finally, she turned around. Her face was a mask. No emotion. No fear. Just a blank, empty stare. "I don't know anyone by that name, Leo," she said. Her voice was flat. "I think the dust in the attic is messing with your head. Go wash your hands. Your father is pulling into the driveway right now." I looked out the kitchen window. Sure enough, my dad's white truck was turning into the gravel drive. The headlights flashed against the house, bright and blinding. I reached into my pocket and squeezed the silver locket. The metal was sharp against my thumb. I knew she was lying. And I knew that the man in the truck wasn't the person I thought he was. But then I saw something else. In the reflection of the kitchen window, I saw a movement in the hallway behind us. A shadow moved past the door. Silas wasn't in the attic anymore. He was in the house. And my dad was walking toward the front door with his keys in his hand. The sound of my dad's truck engine cutting out felt like the start of a countdown. Click. Whir. Silence. In that silence, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I stood there in the kitchen, my hand still gripping the silver locket inside my pocket. The metal was getting warm from my skin. My mom was still standing by the stove. She was staring at the front door, her face as pale as a ghost. She didn't look like a woman waiting for her husband to come home. She looked like a soldier waiting for a bomb to go off. Thud. That was the sound of the truck door slamming shut outside. Jingle. That was the sound of my dad's keys as he walked up the porch steps. I looked back at the hallway. The shadow I had seen, the one that looked like Silas, was gone now. The hallway was dark and empty, but I could feel a presence there. It was like the air was vibrating. Silas was somewhere in the house, hiding in the dark corners he had watched from the outside for 20 years. "Leo," my mom whispered. She didn't turn her head. "Go to your room. Now." "But Mom." "Go," she hissed. It was the first time she had ever used that tone with me. It wasn't mean, it was desperate. I didn't argue. I turned and ran toward the back stairs, the ones that led from the kitchen up to the second floor. I made it halfway up when I heard the front door open. "Hey, I'm home," my dad's voice boomed. It was a big voice. A happy voice. Usually that voice made me feel safe. It was the voice that told me jokes and cheered for me at soccer games. But today, hearing it made my skin crawl. I kept thinking about the scar on Silas's neck. I kept thinking about the way Silas said, "Your father did this." I reached the top of the stairs and pressed my back against the wall. I stayed in the shadows of the landing, peeking through the wooden railings. From here, I could see a slice of the entryway in the kitchen. My dad walked in. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a thick beard that was starting to turn gray. He was wearing his work boots, and they left little bits of dried mud on the rug. He dropped his keys in the bowl on the side table. Clink. "Smells good in here," he said, walking into the kitchen. He leaned over to kiss my mom on the cheek. She flinched. It was tiny, just a small jerk of her head, but I saw it. He saw it too. My dad stopped. He didn't pull away. He stood there looking at her. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very heavy. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked. His voice was lower now. The happy was gone. "I'm fine, Mark," she said, her voice shaking. She started busy working with the teacups, moving them around the counter for no reason. Just a long day. Leo was cleaning the attic. It stirred up a lot of dust. My dad's eyes shifted. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the attic hatch. The attic, huh? He didn't say anything else for a long minute. He just stood there perfectly still. Then he started to walk. He didn't walk toward the stairs. He walked toward the living room window, the one that looked out at the big oak tree. I watched him pull back the curtain. He stood there for a long time, staring out into the dark. "He's not there," my dad said. "Who?" my mom asked, her voice way too high. "You know who. The freak. He's not under his tree tonight." My dad's hand gripped the curtain so hard I thought he might rip it off the rod. "That's the first time in a week I haven't seen his shadow." "Maybe he finally gave up, Mark," my mom whispered. My dad let out a short, mean laugh. "Men like that don't give up. They just find new ways to crawl under the floorboards." I felt a chill go through me. Did he know? Did he know Silas was in the house right now? I backed away from the railing and crept toward my bedroom. My heart was racing. I needed to think. I needed to look at the locket. I closed my door as quietly as I could and locked it. I know it was my own house. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled the locket out. With a shaky fingernail, I pried it open. Inside there was a tiny grainy photo. It was my mother. She was holding a baby. The baby had a tiny tuft of dark hair and was wrapped in a blue blanket. On the other side of the locket, there was a date engraved in the silver. October 12, 2005. That was my birthday. But there was something else. Under the date there were 3 words, "Our little secret." I stared at the baby in the photo. I looked at the nose, the tiny chin. It was me. But if my mom gave this to Silas the night I was born, that meant... I looked at my door. I could hear muffled voices coming from downstairs. They were arguing now. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. My dad's voice was like a low growl of thunder. My mom's was like the whistling wind. Suddenly, I heard a soft thump from my closet. I froze. My breath caught in my lungs. My eyes moved slowly, inch by inch, toward the closet door. I hadn't opened that closet in days. It was full of old hoodies and board games. The handle turned. It didn't turn fast. Turned slowly, bit by bit. Squeak. Squeak. The door cracked open about an inch. A pair of blue eyes peered out from the darkness. "Leo," a voice whispered. It was Silas. I wanted to scream, but I was too scared to make a sound. I just sat there, clutching the locket. Silas pushed the door open a little more. He looked even worse in the light of my bedroom lamp. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in 20 years. "I had to get out of the attic," he whispered, stepping into my room. He was moving like a shadow. He didn't make a sound on the carpet. He was going to check. I heard it in his voice. "He knows someone was up there. You have to leave," I whispered back, my voice cracking. "If he finds you here, he'll..." "I know what he'll do," Silas said. He looked at the locket in my hand. A sad, soft smile touched his lips. "You found it. Is it true?" I asked. I held the locket up. "What you said in the attic? About being my father?" Silas walked over and sat on the floor at the foot of my bed. He looked like a broken man. "Your mother and I, we were everything to each other. We had a life. We had a plan. But Mark, he was obsessed with her. He had money. He had power in this town. He staged an accident. He made everyone think I was a criminal. He told her if she didn't stay with him, he'd make sure I spent the rest of my life in a cage. Or worse." He looked at the door, then back at me. "She stayed to save me, Leo. And then you came along. She told him you were his. She had to. It was the only way to keep you safe. But I couldn't leave you. I couldn't go far. So I stayed under that tree. I watched you grow up through a window. I watched you take your first steps in the yard. I watched you get on the school bus." Tears were stinging my eyes now. "Why are you telling me this now? Why today?" Silas reached out, his hand trembling. He didn't touch me, but he hovered close. "Because he's planning to leave, Leo. I heard them talking last week. He's selling the house. He's taking you and Sarah across the country. If you go, I'll never see you again. I'll lose the only thing I have left." Downstairs, the arguing stopped. The silence was worse than the shouting. Then I heard footsteps. They weren't my mom's light footsteps. They were heavy, slow. Thump, thump, thump. They were coming up the stairs. "Leo," My dad's voice called out from the hallway. He sounded calm. Too calm. Leo, buddy, can you open the door? I want to talk to you about something I found in the kitchen. Silas's eyes went wide with terror. He scrambled back toward the closet. Don't let him in, Silas hissed. Leo, whatever you do, don't let him see me. The doorknob to my room began to rattle. Leo? I know you're in there. Why is the door locked? The rattling got harder. The wood of the door frame started to groan. Open the door, Leo, my dad said. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was cold. Cold as ice. I know he's in there. I can smell the peppermint. My heart stopped. Silas looked at me, his face white with fear. Crack. The door shook as my dad threw his shoulder against it. The door frame let out a sickening crack. Dust from the ceiling fell like snow, landing on my bedspread. I stared at the wood, watching it splinter near the lock. My dad was a strong man. He spent his days lifting heavy equipment at the warehouse, and I knew that door wouldn't hold for long. Hide. I mouthed to Silas. Silas didn't hesitate. He dived back into the closet, pulling the door shut just as the second blow hit. Boom! The door flew open. It hit the wall with a bang that sounded like a small explosion. My dad stood in the doorway. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving under his flannel shirt. His face was flushed, a deep, angry red that made his eyes look even paler than usual. He looked around my room, his gaze moving like a searchlight. Where is he? My dad growled. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad, I said. My voice was trembling. I hated how weak I sounded. I sat on my bed, trying to block his view of the closet with my body. My dad stepped into the room. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. He looked at the air. He began to sniff the room, his nose wrinkling. Don't lie to me, Leo. I told you. I can smell him. That cheap peppermint he sucks on to hide the smell of his rot. He walked over to my desk. He picked up a glass of water I had left there and dumped it on the floor. He was acting like a man possessed. He started pulling my books off the shelves, tossing them aside. Thud, thud, thud. Dad, stop. You're scaring me, I yelled. He stopped. He turned to look at me, and for a second the anger flickered. He looked hurt. Scaring you? Leo, I'm protecting you. That man downstairs, that thing outside, he's a monster. He's been trying to get inside this house for 20 years. He wants to take what's mine. He stepped closer to me. He put his large, calloused hands on my shoulders. His grip was so tight it started to throb. I've worked my whole life to give you this house. To give you a name. Do you understand? I saved your mother from a life of misery. I gave her a home. I looked at his face. This was the man who had tucked me in at night. But now, all I could see was the man who had left a scar on Silas's neck. I thought about the wedding album. I thought about my mother's real smile, the one she only had in those old photos. Did you really save her? I asked quietly. Or did you just trap her? My dad's face went completely still. His hands dropped from my shoulders. The silence that followed was so loud it made my ears ring. What did he tell you? My dad whispered. What lies did he whisper in your ear while I was out providing for this family? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned his head and looked directly at the closet door. My heart felt like it stopped beating. No. Please no. My dad walked toward the closet. Every step was slow and heavy. Thump, thump, thump. He reached out his hand, his fingers curling around the brass handle. Suddenly we heard a crash from downstairs. It sounded like glass shattering in the kitchen. Mark! Mark, help! My mother screamed from below. My dad froze. He looked at the closet, then at the door. The scream had been full of pure terror. It was the kind of scream that makes you forget everything else. Stay here, my dad ordered. He pointed a finger at me, his eyes narrowing. Don't move a muscle, Leo. If you leave this room, so help me. He didn't finish the sentence. He turned and bolted out of the room, his heavy boots drumming down the hallway. The moment he was gone, the closet door pushed open. Silas stepped out. He was shaking so hard he had to lean against the wall to stay upright. We have to go, Silas whispered. We have to get her and leave. He's going to lose it, Leo. I know that look in his eyes. I've seen it before. What was that noise? I asked, my heart still hammering. I don't know, Silas said. But your mother is in danger. He thinks I'm the threat, but he's the one who's been hurting her for years. Every time she looked at me through that window, it was a plea for help. We crept out of my room. The hallway felt like a tunnel. At the end of the hall, the light from the kitchen was spilling out onto the floor. I could hear them talking. Where is it, Sarah? My dad was yelling. I know you kept it. I saw the dust moved in the attic. Where is the book? I burned it, my mother cried. I could hear the sound of her sobbing. It was a wet, broken sound. I burned it years ago, Mark. Please just leave Leo out of this. You're lying. I can see it in your eyes. You still love him. After everything I did for you, you still want that ghost. We reached the top of the back stairs. From here we could see into the kitchen. My dad was holding my mother by the arms. He wasn't hitting her, but he was shaking her. The kitchen table was knocked over, and a glass pitcher of water lay shattered on the tiles. My mother's face was covered in tears. He's your son, Mark. Please, just be a father. He's not mine, my dad roared. The words echoed through the whole house. He let go of her, and she slumped against the counter. My dad put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I knew it since the day he was born, my dad said, his voice cracking. I saw the way he looked at you. I saw the way you looked at him. I tried to be enough. I tried to make you love me, but you just kept looking out that window, waiting for him to come back. I looked at Silas. He was watching my mother. His face was filled with a mix of love and agony. He looked like he wanted to run to her, but he knew that if he did, my dad might finally snap. Leo, Silas whispered in my ear. The back door is right there. If we can get her to the car, we can leave. I have a place. A place where he can't find us. How? I whispered back. He's right there. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy set of keys. I never really left, Leo. I've been living in the old shed behind the garage for years. I have a truck parked in the woods behind the property line. But we have to be fast. I looked at the kitchen. My dad was walking toward the back door now. He was reaching for the wall where he kept his hunting gear. I'm going to end this tonight, my dad said, his voice eerily calm now. If I can't have this family, nobody can. I'm going to find him under that tree, and I'm going to finish what I started 20 years ago. He grabbed a heavy metal flashlight and a pair of leather gloves. He looked like he was going to war. Stay in the kitchen, Sarah, he said without looking back. If you move, I'll know. He stepped out the back door and into the darkness of the yard. My mother collapsed onto the floor, buried her face in her hands, and began to wail. It was the saddest sound I had ever heard. Silas and I didn't wait. We hurried down the stairs as fast as we could without making a sound. We reached the bottom just as my mom looked up. She saw me first. Her eyes went wide. Then she saw Silas standing behind me. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood up, her legs wobbly, and walked toward him. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his neck. You came back, she whispered. I never left, Sarah, Silas said, tears streaming down his face. But we have to go. Right now. Mark is out there looking for me. She looked at me, then at the back door. The fear in her eyes was back, but there was something else now. A tiny spark of hope. The woods, she said. We have to go through the woods. We moved toward the back door, but as I reached for the handle, I saw a flash of light outside. It was my dad's flashlight. He wasn't at the tree. He was standing right by the garage looking at the old shed. The door to the shed was hanging open. He knows, I whispered. My dad turned the flashlight toward the house. The beam hit the kitchen window, blinding us. Sarah, he screamed from the yard. I see him. I see the ghost. He started running toward the house. The bright beam of the flashlight hit the kitchen window like a spotlight on a stage. For a second, everything was white. I couldn't see my mom and I couldn't see Silas. I could only hear the sound of my dad's boots pounding against the frozen grass outside. Thud, thud, thud. He was coming fast. Run! Silas yelled. He didn't whisper anymore. His voice was loud and sharp. He grabbed my mother's hand and I grabbed her other one. We didn't head for the back door. That's where my dad was heading. Instead, we scrambled toward the side door that led into the garage. My mom's slippers slid on the linoleum floor, and she almost fell, but Silas caught her. He held her up with a strength I didn't think he had. We burst into the garage. It was cold and smelled like motor oil and old tires. "The woods are too far if we run across the lawn," Silas panted. His breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. "We have to go through the back of the garage. There's a loose board behind the workbench." "Leo, get the keys," my mom cried out. She was pointing at the wall where a spare set for the old station wagon hung on a hook. I grabbed them. My fingers felt like lead and I almost dropped the ring. The metal jingled loudly in the quiet garage. I felt like every noise we made was a flare in the dark, telling my dad exactly where to find us. Behind us, we heard the kitchen door kick open. Bam! "I know you're in there," my dad roared. His voice didn't even sound human. It sounded like a wounded animal. "Sarah, if you walk out that door with him, there is no coming back. Do you hear me?" We didn't answer. Silas pushed aside a heavy toolbox on the workbench. He kicked at a piece of plywood near the floor. It gave way with a loud crack, revealing a hole just big enough for us to crawl through. "Go, Leo. Go first," Silas urged. I dropped to my knees. The concrete was freezing and scratched my palms. I crawled through the hole, feeling the rough wood snag on my shirt. On the other side, I was outside behind the garage where the shadows were deepest. The wind was howling now, shaking the bare branches of the trees. My mom came through next. Her face was smudged with dirt, and she was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. Silas was the last one out. Just as his legs cleared the hole, we heard my dad enter the garage. "Where are you?" My dad's voice was closer now. We heard him throwing things around, shovels hitting the floor, metal cans clanging. He was searching every corner. "This way," Silas whispered. We ran into the tree line. The woods behind our house were thick with thorns and fallen logs. It was pitch black and I kept tripping over roots I couldn't see. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest, slamming against my ribs. Thump thump, thump thump. Every time a twig snapped under my feet, I jumped. I kept looking back, expecting to see that white beam of light cutting through the trees. We ran for what felt like miles, but it was probably only a few hundred yards. Silas led us to a small clearing where an old rusted pickup truck was hidden under a camouflage tarp. It looked like it had been sitting there for years, but when Silas pulled the tarp back, the truck looked clean. "Get in," he said. But before we could reach the doors, a light flickered to our left. It wasn't a flashlight. It was the motion sensor light from the old shed, the one Silas said he had been living in. And standing right under that light was my dad. He wasn't running anymore. He was standing perfectly still. He was holding something long and dark in his hands. My stomach dropped. It was his hunting rifle. "Stop right there," my dad said. His voice was quiet now, which was even scarier than the shouting. It was the voice he used when he was about to do something he couldn't take back. We froze. We were 20 feet from the truck. My mom stepped in front of me, trying to hide me with her body. "Mark, put the gun down," my mom pleaded. Her voice was thin and broken. "Please. This is between us. Let Leo go." "I can't do that, Sarah," my dad said. He stepped out of the light and into the shadows, but I could still see the silhouette of the rifle. I spent 20 years building this life. I spent 20 years being a father to a boy who wasn't mine. I earned this. And he just stands under a tree and thinks he can take it back. Silas stepped forward, moving away from us. He put his hands up in the air. "It was never about the boy, Mark. It was about her. You stole her. You lied to the police. You told them I hit her. You used your money to bury me. I gave her a better life than a ghost ever could," my dad screamed. He raised the rifle. I heard the click-clack of him chambering around. The sound was so loud in the quiet woods. It felt final. "Leo, get in the truck," Silas said, his voice steady. "I'm not leaving you." I shouted, "Get in the truck." Silas yelled. But it was too late. My dad was walking toward us now. The moonlight hit his face, and he looked like a different person. His eyes were wide and blank. He wasn't the man who fixed my bike anymore. He was a stranger. "You want to know the truth, Leo?" my dad said, looking at me. "You want to know why your real father never came for you?" It wasn't because of me. It's because he's a coward. He's been hiding in a shed like a rat while I did the hard work. That's not true. I screamed. Isn't it? My dad turned the gun toward Silas. If he loved you, he would have fought for you 20 years ago. But he just watched. He watched me love your mother. He watched me raise you. He's a spectator, Leo. And spectators don't get to win. My mom suddenly ran toward my dad. Mark, stop. I'll stay. I'll stay and I'll never look at the window again. Just put it down. My dad hesitated. The barrel of the gun wavered. For a second I thought it was over. I thought he might drop it and cry and we could go back to being a fake broken family. But then Silas made a move. He didn't run away. He ran at my dad. No! I screamed. Silas tackled my dad just as he pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound was deafening. It echoed off the trees, birds flying up from the branches in a panic. I saw a flash of fire from the end of the gun. I saw two bodies hit the ground, rolling into the dead leaves and the dirt. They were a blur of dark coats and limbs, punching and kicking in the mud. Silas! My mom shrieked. I ran forward, my boots slipping. I had to help him. I had to do something. But as I got close, the two men stopped moving. They were locked together on the ground. The rifle lay a few feet away in the grass. Everything went silent again. The only sound was the wind and my own ragged breathing. Then one of the men started to sit up. He was gasping for air, clutching his side. Dark liquid was staining his shirt, turning it black in the moonlight. He looked up at me. His face was covered in dirt. Leo! He wheezed. I took a step back, my heart stopping. I couldn't tell who it was. The shadows were too thick. The blood was everywhere. Suddenly, the headlights of another car hit the clearing from the road nearby. The police? A neighbor? In the bright light of the new car, I saw the man's face clearly. And then I heard a second gunshot. But it didn't come from the rifle on the ground. It came from behind me. I turned around and my jaw dropped. Standing there, holding a small pistol I had never seen before, was my mother. Her hand was steady. Her eyes were cold. She wasn't looking at the man on the ground. She was looking at the car that had just pulled up. It's not over, Leo, she said, her voice sounding like stone. He's here. Who? I whispered, trembling. Who is here, Mom? She didn't answer. She just pointed the gun at the person stepping out of the car. And that's when I realized everything Silas and my dad had told me was a lie. There was a third person in the wedding album. A person whose face had been cut out of every single photo. The door to the car opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. Hello, Sarah, the man said. I believe you have something of mine. The headlights of the car were so bright they felt like needles in my eyes. The man in the suit stood there, perfectly still. He didn't look like a ghost or a monster. He looked like a businessman. He looked like someone who owned the world. Who is he? I screamed, my voice breaking. I looked from my mom, who was holding the pistol, to the two men bleeding on the ground. My dad, or the man I called Dad, was groaning, clutching his shoulder where Silas had tackled him. Silas was face down in the leaves, not moving at all. My mother didn't look at me. She kept her eyes locked on the man in the suit. He's the reason for all of this, Leo, she said. Her voice was flat, empty of any feeling. This is Silas's brother, Julian. Julian took a step into the light. He had the same sharp jaw as Silas, but his face was clean and cold. Silas was always the dreamer, Julian said, his voice smooth like silk. He thought he could run away with the daughter of a rival family and just disappear. He thought love was enough to pay the debts he owed. The truth hit me like a physical weight. My mother wasn't just a woman caught between two men. She was a woman caught between two worlds. My dad, Mark, hadn't just stepped in to save her. He had been hired by Julian 20 years ago to keep her under control, to keep her safe so the family name wouldn't be shamed. Mark was supposed to keep you in that house, Sarah, Julian said, looking at my dad on the ground with disgust. He was supposed to make sure Silas stayed at the edge of the woods watching like a dog. But you two couldn't help yourselves, could you? You started digging through the past. I looked at Silas. His fingers twitched in the dirt. He was alive. You used them, I said to Julian. I felt a heat rising in my chest that I had never felt before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was pure raw anger. You used my mom. You used Silas. You even used the man who raised me. You turned our whole life into a cage. Julian laughed, a small dry sound. It was a comfortable cage, wasn't it, Leo? You had a roof. You had food. You had a father who loved you, even if he was paid to do it. He didn't love me because he was paid. I shouted. I looked at Mark. He was looking up at me, his eyes filled with tears and pain. He was a liar. He was a guard. But in his own broken way, he was the one who had stayed. He was the one who held me when I had nightmares about the man in the window. Everything was a mess of gray. There were no good guys here. Just people making terrible choices to survive. Give me the boy, Sarah, Julian said, reaching out his hand. Silas is finished. Mark is a failure. Come back to the city. We can fix this. My mom's hand started to shake. The pistol was heavy. I could see her heart breaking right there in front of me. She looked at me, then at Silas, then at the man who had been her husband for 20 years. No, she said. She didn't fire the gun at Julian. Instead, she turned and fired it into the air. Bang! The sound startled everyone. In that split second of confusion, Silas scrambled up from the ground. He didn't go for Julian. He didn't go for the gun. He dived for the truck keys that were still in my hand. Leo, move! Silas roared. He grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the truck. My mom followed, her face a mask of determination. Mark, my dad, stayed on the ground. He looked at me one last time, a look of pure apology in his eyes, and then he did something I'll never forget. He grabbed Julian's leg, tripping him as he tried to reach for his own weapon. Go! Mark yelled. Get him out of here. We piled into the old truck. Silas slammed it into gear. The engine roared to life, coughing out a cloud of black smoke. We fishtailed through the mud, the tires screaming as they caught the pavement of the old back road. I looked through the back window. I saw Julian standing in the middle of the road, the headlights of his car making him look small. I saw my dad sitting in the dirt, holding his side. And then the trees swallowed them both. We drove for hours. The sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful morning, which felt strange after such a dark night. Silas was driving. His hands were covered in dried blood, but he was calm. My mom sat in the middle, her head resting on his shoulder. She was finally asleep. Where are we going? I asked. My voice felt scratchy and old. Somewhere far, Silas said. He looked at me through the rearview mirror. Those blue eyes were tired, but they were peaceful. I have money saved. Not much, but enough. We're going to start a life where no one knows our names. I reached into my pocket and felt the silver locket and the wedding album I had managed to grab from the kitchen before we ran. I looked at the photo of the woman in the white dress. I realized then that family isn't about whose blood is in your veins. It isn't about who has the legal papers or the wedding photos. Family is about who is willing to stand under a tree in the rain for 20 years just to make sure you're breathing. And sometimes, family is about the man who lies to you for your own protection, even if it breaks his heart. I didn't know if I could ever forgive Mark. I didn't know if I could ever truly know Silas. But as the miles passed, the weight in my chest started to lift. The secret was out. The attic was empty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking out a window at a ghost. I was looking at the road ahead. Looking back, I learned that the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you knew. But once the walls are gone, you can finally see the sun. If you're listening to this, maybe you have a secret in your own family. Maybe there's a box in your attic you're afraid to open. My advice? Open it. It might be scary and it might change your life forever. But it's better to live in a hard truth than a beautiful lie. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.